Do you remember when the streets of the United States were full of small pickup trucks, lightweight, easy to handle, and with that utilitarian charm that made them irresistible? The Ford Ranchero, the Chevrolet El Camino, even that quirky Volkswagen Rabbit pickup were compact vehicles that worked both for jobs and everyday life. But one day, they simply disappeared. Today, everything is dominated by giants like the Ford F-150 or the Chevrolet Silverado. What happened to those small pickups that were once so common and beloved? Why don't they exist at dealerships anymore, not even as an option? The answer isn't as simple as people stopped buying them. Behind their disappearance is an explosive mix of changing laws, strategic tariffs, cold business decisions, and, above all, a radical shift in the way Americans see their cars. In this video, I'm going to tell you the whole story. Why small pickups disappeared from the United States, what replaced them, and whether there's any hope they might come back someday. There was a time when owning a small pickup in the United States wasn't just practical, it was almost poetic. It was the 70s and 80s. The world was changing at full speed, and American streets were filling up with compact pickups that combined the best of both worlds. They were hardworking, yet city-friendly at the same time. Picture yourself driving a Chevrolet El Camino, or maybe you'd rather have a Volkswagen Rabbit pickup. There was also the Ford Ranchero, the Dodge Rampage, or the Plymouth Scamp, models with names that now sound like museum relics, but back then were everyday stars. But the most important thing is what they represented, a time when not everything had to be bigger, stronger, or more expensive. These pickups spoke the language of simplicity. They were the perfect balance of utility, economy, and style. And then, something changed. The market no longer wanted a tool, it wanted a statement of power. And what used to be enough with 2 doors and a small rear bed now had to have a double cab, digital screens, 4-wheel drive, and enough height to look over the traffic. To understand the disappearance of small pickups, you have to look at the people, because it wasn't the truck that changed, it was the American consumer. During the 80s and 90s, a silent but unstoppable transformation began. Pickups stopped being just work tools and became symbols of lifestyle, status, even identity. But as the economy grew and the suburbs expanded, something changed in the consumer's mind. It was no longer enough for the vehicle to do its job, now it had to impress. Manufacturers, of course, listened to this new market tune. The Ford F-150, the Chevrolet Silverado, and the Ram 1500 not only became more popular, they turned into true cultural icons. In some regions, especially in the south and the center of the country, owning a big pickup was synonymous with personal success and economic power, and the smaller models simply no longer fit in. This doesn't mean that small pickups were bad, quite the opposite. But in a market where desire outweighs need, logic loses to emotion, and that emotion was drawn to bigger things. In every great story of transformation, there's a hidden detail that, although it seems insignificant, changes the course of everything. In the case of small pickups in the United States, that detail was a series of federal regulations that altered the very shape of the vehicles. To understand this, we need to travel back to the 1970s. Back then, many light trucks, especially those used for delivery and cargo, used a design called cab-over or cab-over engine, which was ideal for maneuvering in urban areas and, most importantly, allowed them to comply with a key regulation, the total permitted length of the truck and trailer combination. But in 1982, the United States literally changed the rules. A new regulation established that the maximum allowed length for trailers would no longer include the truck's cab. Now they could make the cab as long as they wanted without worrying about affecting the vehicle's total length, and that changed everything. Manufacturers started making trucks and pickups with longer, wider, taller, and more powerful cabs. The conventional design, the one we know today, with a long hood and a cab behind it, became the standard, and with it, the era of small pickups began to slowly die out. The regulation wasn't the only problem. Stricter and more comprehensive regulations on emissions, safety standards, and energy efficiency also started to appear, disproportionately affecting smaller models, especially imported vehicles, like a domino piece falling and pushing all the others in a chain reaction. Brake time equals 0.5s/. The new laws led to new designs, and those designs led to new expectations. It was no longer just about fulfilling a function. It was about making the most of what the system allowed. And so, almost without anyone noticing, the law made small pickups less and less profitable, less practical, and less desirable. Few people have heard of the chicken tax. It even sounds kind of funny, like something unimportant, but in reality, it's one of the hardest and most lasting blows the small pickup industry has suffered in the United States. It all started in the 1960s, right in the middle of the Cold War. Europe, especially Germany. Germany and France decided to impose high tariffs on the import of American chickens. The United States, of course, didn't just sit back and do nothing. In response, President Johnson imposed a 25% tariff in 1964 on certain European products, including light trucks. The measure was intended to pressure the Europeans into lifting their trade barriers. But even though tensions eased over time, the tariff was never removed because, of course, making a small pickup in Japan or Germany could be cheap, but when that vehicle arrived on American soil, the price would skyrocket. Toyota, Mazda, Nissan, all these brands had seen significant success in previous decades with their compact models, but with the chicken tax, importing those models meant taking on a huge cost or selling them at a loss. Neither of those options was sustainable. Some brands tried to dodge the trap with creative tricks. For example, Ford imported its Transit Connect model from Turkey as a passenger vehicle with temporary rear seats, and once it arrived, they converted it into a cargo vehicle by removing the seats. A kind of legal window dressing. The message was clear: if you want to sell small pickups in the United States, you have to manufacture them here. And for many international manufacturers, it just wasn't worth it. The result? The market was flooded with full-size pickups, made locally, that didn't have to pay the tariff, offered more power and more space, and, thanks to already shifted cultural preferences, fit perfectly into the American dream. In the automotive world, like in almost any business, it doesn't matter so much how many vehicles you sell, but how much you earn from each one. And in that sense, big pickups are true gold mines for the brands. Let's take a concrete example: the Ford F-150, the best-selling vehicle in the United States for decades. With just that model, Ford generates billions of dollars in net profits every year. Not revenue, profits. In comparison, a compact pickup might only bring in a few hundred or a few $1,000s per unit. The difference is huge. On the other hand, with a small pickup, there's not as much room to inflate the price without stepping out of the budget segment. But that, from the manufacturer's point of view, also means lower profits and less motivation to produce them. Plus, there's another detail. The production costs of a large truck and a small one aren't as different as you might think. So, from an industrial standpoint, it makes more sense to manufacture an expensive model, even if you sell fewer units. Manufacturers saw all this and made a clear strategic decision to abandon small pickups and focus on large and mid-size models, where the profit margin is higher, demand is more stable, and competition, thanks to the chicken tax, is much more controlled. For years, the verdict was clear: small pickups were dead in the United States. Showrooms forgot about them, commercials didn't mention them, and consumers didn't even look for them. It seemed like their story had ended, buried under layers of noisy V8s and trucks that take up more space than a New York apartment. But the world turns, and in recent years, something interesting has been happening. In 2022, Ford surprised everyone with the launch of the Ford Maverick, a compact truck with a modern look, an optional hybrid engine, and, most surprising of all, a base price close to $20,000. It was an immediate success, so much so that demand outpaced production and there were waiting lists. And it's not alone. Hyundai also launched its own contender, the Santa Cruz, with a more urban focus, modern design, and targeting young professionals looking for a versatile but not oversized vehicle. Although its style is more crossover than pure pickup, its philosophy is reminiscent of the compact trucks of the past. So, does this mean that small pickups are making a comeback? The most honest answer is, maybe. The truth is, there are signs, and if brands can find a way to make them profitable without sacrificing quality or design, we could be witnessing the start of a new era. Today, small pickups are more like museum curiosities, retro icons, or collector's toys. But don't underestimate the market. What was once dismissed can become desirable again. So now you know, small pickups disappeared due to a combination of culture, politics, economics, and market evolution. But their spirit, that blend of utility and charm, still lives on and maybe, just maybe, is waiting for the right moment to return.